Hakdama to Mesechta Shvius. The pasuk says, "Shei shanim tizras artzecha v'asaftas tuasa, v'hashvius tishmitenu netashta v'ochlo avyone amecha v'yisrom teichel chayes hasoda kein tasel kamachol ezesecha." For 6 years you may sow your land and gather in its crop, but in the 7th you shall leave it untended and abandoned, and the poor of your people shall eat, and the beasts of your field shall eat what is left. So shall you do to your vineyard and to your olive grove. Weiter in Sefer Vayikra, Chavhei, Perek Beis through Zion, Daber el b'nei Yisrael v'amarta aleim ki savoyu la'oretz asher ani nosen lechem v'shovsa ha'oretz Shabbos l'Hashem. Speak to b'nei Yisrael and say to them, when you come to the land that I am giving you, the land shall observe a Sabbath rest for Hashem. Shei shanim tizras hadecha v'shei shanim tizmar karmecha v'asaftas tuasa. For 6 years you may sow your field, and for 6 years you may prune your vineyard, and you may gather in its crop. Ubashana hashviyas Shabbos Shabbos and Yeh la'oretz Shabbos Hashem sodach l'sizra v'kamach l'sizmar. But the 7th year shall be a complete rest for the land, Shabbos for Hashem. Your field you shall not sow, and your vineyard you shall not prune. That which grows by itself of your harvest you shall not reap, and the grapes you have set aside for yourself you shall not pick. It shall be a year of rest for the land. Shabbos ha'oretz lechem la'ochla l'chol la'avdecha v'la'masecha v'l'schircho l'seishocha gar mimach. The uncultivated produce of the land shall be yours to eat for you, for your servant, and for your maidservant, and for your laborer, and for your resident who dwell with you. And for your animals and for your beasts that are in your land shall all its crops be to eat. And again we have in Sefer Dvarim, in Perek Tezvav, at the end of every 7 years you shall make a cancellation. And this is the manner of the cancellation. Every creditor shall release his authority over what he has lent his fellow. He shall not press his fellow or his brother, for he has been proclaimed a cancellation for Hashem. Then Pasuk Tes, and if every 7 years beware lest there be a lawless thought in your heart, saying the 7th year is approaching, the year of cancellation, and you are stingy towards your needy brother, and you do not give him, then he may appeal to Hashem, and it will be a sin upon you. In these psukim, the Torah commands that every 7th year we are to leave our crops unharvested and allow others to take and eat them. We are forbidden to do certain forms of agricultural work, and we must forego loans that are owed us. This year is called Shvi'is or Shemitah. Shvi'is is the 7th, or Shemitah literally means release or cancellation, which refers to releasing control of crops and debts. The law involving the land and its produce apply only in Eretz Yisrael, like most of the Hilchas and Mitzvahs Hatluyas Ba'aretz, but the halachas regarding loans apply in Chutz La'aretz as well. The Torah names 4 activities that are also during Shemitah: sowing, pruning, reaping, and picking. Sowing, in Sefer Vayikra and other psukim, the Torah refers to Zriya, which means planting grains and vegetables. It does not mention planting trees, which would be referred to as Netiyah. Therefore, some Rishonim hold that tree planting during Shemitah is mutar min ha-Torah and asur only midrabanan. Others, however, maintain that planting trees is going to be asur midaraisa. Pruning means cutting off dried branches that the tree grows better. According to some shittas, only the pruning of grapevines is asur min ha-Torah, since the Torah specifies grapevines. Pruning other species is only asur midrabanan. And others hold that all species are going to be asur midaraisa. Reaping and picking. There's a difference between sowing and pruning on the one hand and reaping and picking on the other. Sowing and pruning are completely forbidden, while reaping and picking are forbidden only in a limited sense. Since the Torah permits the produce of Shemitah for eating, and since the eating of the produce would be impossible if all reaping and picking were forbidden, it's clear that the Isser against reaping and picking are not absolute. The Torah's intent is only to forbid reaping and picking in the normal way. One is allowed to reap and pick in a manner that is unusual. Some Rishonim hold that the reaping or picking must be done with tools that are not commonly used for that purpose. The Rambam says that it may be done with the usual tools, but one may not harvest an entire field at once. According to the Rambam, the restriction against reaping and picking in the usual manner applies to all produce of Shemitah. Other Rishonim, though, hold that it applies only to produce that grew in a field that the owner unlawfully closed off to prevent people from entering. The Torah is mechayiv the owner to give up ownership of his crop and open his field to everyone, to be mafkirah, so that they can enter and take what is growing there. If he broke this law and closed off his field, the produce must be picked in a way that is unusual. Crops from the open fields, however, may be reaped or picked in the normal manner. Even reaping and picking in an unusual way are mutter only after the closed fields had been opened. As long as the field remains closed, picking its produce is forbidden completely. Even when reaping or picking in a way that's mutter, one may not take so much produce that it will have to be stored for a long time. The Torah allows Shemitah produce for eating, but not for long-term storage. Although the Torah's main passage about Shemitah, which we mentioned above, does not mention plowing, this activity is also asur. According to Rabbi Kiva, the pasuk Becharish V'Akatzir Tishbais, from plowing and reaping you shall desist, forbids plowing even 30 days before Shemitah, Erev Shvius, and therefore plowing is certainly asur during Shemitah. Rabbi Shmuel, however, understands this phrase as referring to Shabbos. In his view, the Shemitah-related isurim against plowing are not learned from a pasuk, but from halacha l'maisha misinai, which carries the same force as a chiyuv d'oraisa. In addition to the forms of work mentioned above, the Chachamim forbade many other agricultural procedures during Shemitah, for example, clearing stones from a field and watering plants. As a rule, these rabbinic prohibitions apply only when the purpose of the activity is to improve the plants of the land. If the purpose of the work is merely to protect against harm, so that it just maintains growth but doesn't improve it, it is mutter. Although Shemitah does not begin until Rosh Hashanah of the 7th year, there is an issur to plow even before Rosh Hashanah. According to the Chiyuv HaTorah, this extra period, which is called Tos V'Shvius, is the last 30 days of the 6th year. The source for the pre-Shemitah issur is either from Becharish V'Akatzir Tishbais, according to Rabbi Kiva, or Halacha l'Maisha Misinai. There's a practical difference between the two positions. If the pre-Shemitah prohibition is derived from the pasuk, it applies nowadays as well. But if the makar for this issur is from Torah Shebal Peh, so this halacha will not apply when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, because the Torah Shebal Peh included a provision stating that the issur would remain in force as long as the Beis HaMikdash stood. This is the halachically accepted view. Thus, today, when the Beis HaMikdash is no longer standing, all work is mutter until Shemitah actually begins. So there's no issur of Tos V'Shvius B'zman Hazeh, according to some. The Chachamim extended the period to the time in the 6th year when plowing no longer benefits the 6th year's crop, and therefore obviously done in preparation for the 7th year. For ordinary fields, this time was set at Pesach of the 6th year, and for fields of trees, it was set by Shavuos of the 6th year. Many Rishonim hold that other forms of work besides plowing are also forbidden 30 days before Shemitah, as we will see in the Masechta. The Torah commands the owner of land in which Shemitah produce is growing to give up ownership of the produce and let anyone enter his land and take it. This is learned out of the pasuk V'Hashvius Tishmetenu Unatashta. But in the 7th year you shall leave it untended and unharvested. If a person blocks access to his field by locking the gate, he has violated this commandment. However, once he has opened his field to all, the owner too is allowed to take produce for himself. As mentioned above, no one may take more than what he needs for short term. It is forbidden to take so much that he will have to put it into long-term storage. The produce of Shemitah is kadosh in the sense that it is subject to certain restrictions. Even after a person picked ownerless Shemitah produce and made it his private property, it still has kedusha. These restrictions are learned from the pasuk V'Hoseh Shabbos Ha'aretz Lachem La'ochla. The uncultivated produce of the land shall be yours to eat. This implies that Shemitah produce may be used only for eating, and it may not be wasted or used for business activity. For example, one may not buy the produce at a lower price to sell it at a higher price. It is derived from the word lachem, for you, that Shemitah produce may also be used for any human benefit that resembles eating. When one eats, the food is destroyed at the same time that it gives benefit. Thus, any process of this nature is also permitted, provided that is a normal use of such produce. For example, Shemitah oil may be used as fuel in a lamp because the oil is consumed at the same time that it provides light. Shemitah produce, that is animal food, may be fed to animals, as it says in the next pasuk, and for your animals and for your beasts that are in your land shall all this crop be to eat. Produce that is used for eating or any purpose similar to eating, such as fueling a lamp, has a status of Shemitah produce, which is subject to the regulation of Kedusha Shvius. Growths that are used in a manner that does not resemble eating, they are destroyed before they provide benefit, are not classified as Shemitah produce. For example, wood is not Shemitah produce because when wood is used to fuel a fire, it is destroyed, it turns into charcoal before it provides the necessary heat. Therefore, wood that grows during Shemitah lacks Shemitah sanctity, lacks Kedusha Shvius, and may be used for any purpose. There's a difference between various types of plants in regard to how they become classified as Shemitah produce. The status of fruit depends on when it first emerges from the tree. This is the stage known as chanata, when the petals of the flower fall off, as we'll see. If a fruit reaches this stage in the 7th year, it's Shemitah produce, otherwise it's not Shemitah produce. The status of grains, such as wheat or barley, depends on when it reaches a third of its growth. The status of vegetables depends on when they are picked. Minat Teira, all Shemitah produce is permitted for eating and similar activities. However, midrabanon, after growths, plants that grew by themselves during the Shemitah, either from seeds that fell from the crop of the 6th year, or from roots that remained in the ground after the harvest of the 6th year, the Rabbanon were concerned that people might unlawfully plant crops of Shemitah and then claim that what grew, which is subject to the restrictions of Shemitah produce, is the aftergrowth of the 6th year's crop, which use is not restricted. So to prevent this, the Rabbanon were geyser, the Svichin are Asur. However, this Isser does not apply to fruit trees. Since a tree does not produce fruit in the year that it is planted, a tree illegally, meaning Shalai Kadin, that was planted during Shemitah will not yield Shemitah produce in any event. The Isser is limited to species such as grains and vegetables which produce a yield in the year they are planted. The Isser also does not apply to species that are not usually cultivated. Another halacha that applies to Shemitah produce is the obligation of biur, removal. This obligation concerns Shemitah produce that a person has picked and taken into his home. The Torah says, for your animals and for your beasts that are in your land shall all its produce be to eat. By mentioning both the animals, domestic and wild animals, the pasuk teaches that a person may feed Shemitah produce to his domestic animals only as long as that type of produce is available in the field for wild animals to eat. When the species is no longer available in the fields, for example, because it has rotted, it has to be removed from the house. The person who picked produce to that species must perform the process of biur, in which he gives up his rights of ownership in the produce and puts it outside his house for anyone to take. Once this is done, the produce may be eaten. Even the person who has just made it ownerless can take it back for himself. The Rambam defines biur differently. In his view, when the deadline for a species of Shemitah produce arrives, when the species is no longer available in the fields, it becomes forbidden for consumption and must be destroyed. According to most other shittas, biur is minat Torah. However, the Ramban suggests that it is only a chiyuv midrabanan. If a person fails to perform biur at the required time, the produce becomes asur forever, as explained in the Ramban. Now a little bit about Shemitah's Ksafim. The Torah commanded the lender to cancel all loans that had become due before the end of the Shemitah year once Shemitah ends. At that time, he must give up his claim to money that is owed him, and he's forbidden to demand it from the borrower. However, because of these laws, it is concerned that people might refrain from lending money for fear that they will be unable to recover it after Shemitah. The Torah therefore prohibits one to turn away a borrower for this reason. A device known as prusbul was instituted by Hillel, which allowed loans to be collected without violating the Shemitah law. The halachas regarding the cancellation of loans of Shemitah are not limited to Eretz Yisrael, but apply everywhere.